We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown, Marshall and Western Kentucky.
It's intercepted by Key, and Key has one man to beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
There goes Key. Splits the defenders and he's gone. 65 yards, he completes it with a somersault.
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall is going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. The series of position group breakdowns continues this week. It's wide receivers and tight ends, Trace. Trace is here, obviously, with me since I'm talking to Trace. We're going to talk about the herd, and this is the area where you and I both think this is where some of the bigger question marks are for this Thundering Herd team in 2019. Not because of a lack of talent per se, but more so with kind of what we've been running into talking about Western Kentucky, which is a little bit of the unknown. Some key losses from this herd unit, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So we're going to lump the wide receivers and tight ends together. We'll talk about them a little bit individually, but as far as the rankings that feel still that we like to follow goes, they're lumped in together. There's not a separate wide receiver column and tight end column. So speaking of Phil Steele, this unit, he ranks them tied for 7th in the Conference USA with Middle Tennessee. I can't say that I completely disagree with that, Trace. I mean, you know, until we see some actual production on the field, maybe this is a middle of the pack Conference USA unit right now. You know, that just time will tell, I guess. So you could talk to me about this unit a little bit before we get started, talking about projected starters and rotation and things like that. So initial thoughts on what the unit looks like. I mean, I don't know exactly where you want to go with it, but roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, I agree with the Phil Steele ranking. I was thinking heading into this season that was the position, the unit that I was most concerned, the most question marks surrounding the unit would be the wide receiving unit and then tight ends. I mean, tight ends if you want to lump them in together, but like overall, I think middle of the pack is fair because to be honest, I mean, they really don't have right now a clear number one threat at receiver. You know, they have guys that could end up reaching that point, but they really don't have a clear number one heading into the season. They've had that in the last couple of years or last few years, I guess. But I mean, it's like you said, it's not that they don't have talent because they do have talent. It's just, when will any of these guys start looking like Tyree Brady or Aaron Dobson or whoever? Because these legit number one receivers. Can anybody step up to that level? That remains to be seen. But yeah, I mean, 7th in the conference is fair, I think, because they have a lot of question marks heading into the year. So we'll see. I mean, I think they have potential, but at the same time, it's not a for sure thing. So that's where I am with it right now.
Well, I think the wide receiver unit has got to be the one where the most question marks are. I think you probably feel pretty good about the tight ends and what they look like, or at least the top two guys. And then after that, it's a little bit of an unknown. But the wide receivers, I think we're not talking about can a guy be number one. It's like they might be on the roster. It's just since Tyree Brady's been there, since there was a Marcel Williams there, none of these guys had to be that number one guy. So the question really is not is there one necessarily on the roster, but can they rise to the occasion? I think like we keep saying the talent's there, it is there. So now that somebody has to be the guy, who's the guy that will be the guy? So let's talk about some projected starters. And of course, you've got to start with the most productive fellow returning at wide receiver, and that's Obi Obialo, the 6'3", 216-pound senior. And as we go down this list of guys that I jotted down, One thing really stood out to me, and that it was senior across the projected starters. So that's something that's a little bit of new, I would say, to the herd. I can't remember there being a all senior projected starting lineup in quite some time. So back to Mr. Obialo, 6'3", 216-pound senior, 42 catches last year, 505 yards, good for 12 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns. We talked about it in several instances before. Can Obialo go from 42 catches to be that 70 catch guy? Can he be that 75 catch guy? Can he carry that workload? He certainly has the build to do it. He certainly has the athleticism to do it. But is he going to be the number one guy? He's one of two, obviously, that's listed here in these several guys I'm going to mention that will be spend the majority of the time as an outside receiver. And generally that's your quote unquote number one guy. He's the outside threat. So let's move inside. Projected starter at the slot position, wide receiver Artie Henry, 6'1", 186-pound senior. Just 17 catches last year, 143 yards, good for 8.4 yards a catch, just 2 touchdowns, but Artie really turned it on towards the end of the year. That's where the bulk of that production came from. So it's a nice little springboard headed into this 2019 season. Now we get to a new man in town, transfer from the University of Kentucky, wide receiver Taven Richardson, the 6'3", 207-pound senior. Just 13 catches last year, 108 yards, good for 8.8 yards per catch. No touchdowns last year in Lexington. So a lot of game experience for Richardson, but not an abundance of statistics to back up all that playing time. So we'll see how he fits in for the herd, but still projected as a starter across from Obialo. So we'll see how that goes. Projected starter at tight end. Not really sure if there will be too many 2 tight end sets, but the majority of the time they're running one. It'll be Armani Levias, the 6'4", 257-pound senior. 25 catches last year, 327 yards, 13.1 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns. Good enough to earn him third-team All-Conference USA honors. He even cracks the list of Phil Steele's draft-eligible tight ends, coming in at number 40. He makes Phil Steele's projected – it's not really a projected, I don't know why I said that, preseason all-conference team, second team. And while we're talking about that, Mr. Obialo lands on the 4th team. So Trace, senior. It's had to have been a while, but what about these 4 guys in particular?
Yeah, they're talented guys. Artie Henry started, like you said, coming on towards the end of the year last year. I started to notice him make a lot of plays. Had a touchdown in that UTSA game, I remember, and a couple other nice plays. Made some catches in that bowl game. So Henry's catching on. I think he'll be a good addition this year as no doubt kind of starting caliber player this year. I think he'll fit into that role nicely. Obialo's been good for 2 years. He's been a nice solid second or third option. It's just now, like we keep saying over and over, can he make the jump from being a second or third option to being the first option? That's going to be the big deciding factor, and honestly could decide the fate of the wide receiving unit, is whether he can make that jump or not, which I think he's capable of doing it. So we'll see. And then Richardson, like you said, he doesn't have an abundance of stats, but he's a pretty well traveled guy that's played a lot of SEC football, so I think he's going to fit in nicely in the receiving unit this year for the herd, because they lost a couple guys, major cogs from last year. So I like Richardson. I think he'll be good. And then Levias at tight end. He had a solid year last year. He had a year that was I was thinking about it before this, and he kind of had a year that reminded me of Ryan Yurichek's freshman year at Marshall. Kind of similar numbers if you look at him. He kind of made some plays. Could be a guy that really makes a good leap this year. We know how good Yurichek was and Marshall's success with tight ends over the last 2 decades, really, or whatever. So, I think Levias is going to be good this year. I think, and then Gaines. Behind him, we'll touch on him more, but I think Gaines is going to have a good year. So, there's options there. It's just there needs to be a separation from the pack, and I think that's going to be the thing that they have to work on the hardest.
Well, just the other day, Doc Holliday gave his whatever you want to call it, preseason press conference, like the first presser of the football season, and he talked about some of these guys that we're talking about, and he was particularly happy and pleased with the performance of Obi Obialo and thinks he has the potential to be the number one guy. But look, somebody's got to do it, because in this Tim Cramsey offense, they like to chuck the ball all around the field. We know they've got capable runners, and anytime you've got capable runners in the backfield, that leaves things open in the passing game for big chunk plays, because those linebackers creep in an extra step. Those safeties start playing a tad closer to the line of scrimmage. So the opportunity should be there. Now it comes down to, can you execute? But, you know, two 6'3" guys on the outside. You've got a 6'1" guy playing slot who is a bit of a burner. And we can talk about another burner here in a little bit when we get into the rotation that's going to come into the slot position when Mr. Henry needs a breather. But the speed's there. They got height where they need height. Athleticism is abundant, okay? And there are guys on the roster that have performed. They have stats. So, you know, hopefully this is just one of those cases where these guys just need more opportunity to make more plays than what they've been getting. I mean, that's hopefully all you need to have happen if you're a Herd fan. Like, you should be fine. Maybe just throw me the ball 75 times and I'll catch it 75 times. That should be your main worry. So let's talk about the guys in the rotation, Trace. Now, the talent really doesn't drop off. You've got some guys with some stats, and then it's a little bit of a youth movement. I'm going to mention 4 guys. 2 Herd fans will know. 2 they may not know. And then, of course, if you have anybody else you want to talk about, definitely we want to get more names out there for these fans to follow. And, of course, we're going to start at the slot wide receiver position that I just mentioned, and that's Willie Johnson. Fans should know Willie. He's been there, 3 years now or something like that. I mean, I think he's a redshirt junior. The 6', 181 pound listed as a junior in the book here. Only 11 receptions last year, 109 yards, but you know, Willie's a speedster. I mean, he can make plays if he can get free. So definitely not somebody that you want to be playing against. Moving on down the list, wide receiver Brock Thompson, newcomer to the Herd this year. 6'2", 176 pound freshman. Wide receiver Talek Keaton, 6'1", 183 pound redshirt freshman. And then the other main tight end, Xavier Gaines. Interesting story. You know, highly rated dual threat quarterback coming out of high school, comes to the Herd, transitions to tight end, and is essentially learning the position for the past couple of years. And, you know, had some big plays in the Gasparilla Bowl, which gives some fans some hope that, you know, it's starting to click for him and they could see big things from Xavier this year. He's a 6'3", 226 pound junior, 13 catches, 213 yards last year. Hey, 16.4 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. So, Trace, of those guys, let's talk about those guys. And then if you've got somebody else you want to talk about, I definitely want to get those guys out there too. So what about the 4 guys I just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are guys to keep in the back of your mind for sure. I mean, like Willie Johnson, I was just thinking about him a little bit more here before we did the show. And like, I feel like he's a guy that's just waiting to have a breakout year. I feel like he's really close to doing it. You know, the last couple of years 2016, obviously he missed most of the year, but the last couple of years he's had moments at receiver. You know, I remember he had a real big touchdown a couple of years against Cincinnati. A couple of years ago against Cincinnati, had a pretty good times last year catching the ball and stuff. But he never really got a whole lot of targets. But now I think, you know, with the losses that we're going to talk about and have talked about with Brady and Williams, I think Willie Johnson will have a good year. I mean, I feel like he's going to have his best year to date. You know, it's not that it's saying necessarily that much because he hasn't always been targeted, but I think he'll have a good year. You know, a couple of younger guys there could get in the mix. Who knows? Like I said a little bit earlier, I think Xavier Gaines is going to have a good year. I like some of the stuff I saw from him last year. Really athletic, talented guy. I feel like he's definitely somebody to keep your eye on, especially if that's a good 1-2 punch that he got a tight end this year. So it worked out pretty good last year. I think it'll be better this year. And then another guy that we were kind of talking about before the show, could, or texted before the show, could have a pretty good impact at times. Maybe if he gets in there, I don't know. That wide receiver by the name of Corey Gamage, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, more or less. But he was a pretty big, highly thought of receiver out of high school, 3-star recruit, had a lot of Power 5 offers, Miami, Florida, University of Florida, bunch of teams like Power 5 teams were looking at him. He looks like he's going to could be a really good guy. So, 6'3", 6'4", about $190. He ends up looking like he could look. That's something that you have to keep in your mind for sure, because Marshall's had success with freshman receivers, in the past. So if he comes out there and if he can get a chance, I don't even know what the situation would be if he would play at all. But like if he has a chance to play, that could be somebody that comes out of nowhere and really breaks out. But so there's options there. I mean, it's like I said, it's just a matter of who's going to separate. That's what they need.
Given the situation that this Herd wide receiving unit is in, with the lack of a number one guy and the relative inexperience of several positions, or the depth at several positions, we'll put it that way, the depth. A guy like Corey Gamage should definitely try to get worked into a game. When you talk about opening with a team like VMI, that Marshall should win that game very handily. You should think that these guys would be given opportunities to get into that game and make plays. And if they develop a hot hand, then maybe that leads to reps in the next game and the next game and the next game. And then, you've got, like I said, 4 games to decide, all right, we're going to shut it down for the year, or, we're going to roll with it and see what happens. So definitely keep your eye on Corey Gamage. I mean, 6'4", what is it, $190? I mean, you can't teach that. So you like height at the wide receiver position. So we'll see how it all works out. But I think this year for the Herd wide receivers in particular, it's a case of who can separate. That's what it is. That's what it'll be. So let's move on here. Let's talk the meat and potatoes, the questions. Who's the hardest to replace from this unit? We talked about a couple of big guys that were lost from last year. I think I know the answer. I think everybody on planet Earth knows the answer. But who's the hardest to replace from this unit?
Yeah, planet Earth knows it's Tyree Brady, no doubt about it. What an amazing player he was for 2 years. I went on record last year during the season saying he's the best wide receiver that Doc has had while he's been at Marshall, and I still believe that. Even over Aaron Dobson and, other guys like Devontae Allen and Angelo Jean Lewis and Deontay McManus and whoever you want to name, I think Brady's the best out of all of them. So, he was just a superstar. Back-to-back first-team All-Conference USA selection, 2 straight years. That's pretty hard to do for a receiver. Just a great player. And by all accounts, he's doing really good things right now for Jacksonville, trying to make the roster for the Jags. So he's definitely the toughest to replace. And last year he had a season, stat-wise, that Marshall receiver hasn't had since 2014. He had the most catches and receiving yards in a season since 2014 with Tommy Schuler. So it was a few year gap that they didn't have a 70 catch guy or 1,000-yard receiving guy. So Brady's just a phenomenal player. Everybody knew that he was going to be something, but just seeing it play out for 2 years, you knew he was special receiver. So he's the toughest to replace.
Yeah, anytime you lose a 1,000-yard receiver, that's got to be the guy.
Yeah.
So of all the names we talked about and all the question marks and all the relative certainties that we know, who are you most excited to see out of all these guys?
Yeah, that's a lot of guys, but I think I'll go with Taven Richardson, just because I haven't personally watched any of his stuff, so I don't know really what he brings to the table. But from what I've been hearing and stuff, through fans and outlets and whatever you want to say, it sounds like he's going to be a good player this year. As a grad transfer thing, as a SEC player. It's not like, and that's the thing that we were talking about, his stats really weren't that emphatic at Kentucky, but look at Tyree Brady's limited stats at Miami. He had no stats. Right. So, it doesn't always necessarily matter, but it's just the talent. If the talent's put in the right positions, and Kentucky obviously probably has more weapons at their disposal than Marshall does because they're in the SEC. So, and now that Richardson's at Marshall, losing Brady and Marcel Williams both, he's going to be one of the guys they lean on heavily, and I expect him to have a good year, breakout year kind of caliber. So that's where I'm going with that. I'm going with Richardson.
That's decent. Yeah, that was a good analogy when you talk about Tyree Brady not having hardly any stats at Miami and coming into Marshall and dominating the conference for essentially 2 years. So who's the breakout guy in 2019 for these Herd wide receivers / tight ends?
Oh gosh, these questions are so hard. Like, I'm legit struggling with these things. Let's go with Willie Johnson for that.
Okay.
Because like, I'm really wanting to see what he can do if he gets, I don't know, 50 balls thrown at him. Because like, I feel like he's probably only had like 30 catches in 2 years or something like that. So like, I want to see what he can do if he gets the opportunity to go out there and make catches and make plays, because we know he's a super fast guy, speedster. We know what he brings to the table in that regard, but we don't know what he brings as a receiver or at least we don't for the most part, because he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity. So I'd like to see him get more opportunity, and I think that will pay off in the end for the Herd and him in particular. So I'll go with Willie Johnson for the breakout, although Xavier Gaines is a tight end. I almost went with him too.
Yeah, I think that's I'm with you, man. Willie Johnson had a bumpy road there. Would he have like a broken leg or something like that? Missed the whole
ACL
year
or something, I think.
It might have been. I thought it was something serious. I thought he broke ACL serious too, but I thought it was a broken bone or something like that a couple of years back. But anyway, maybe next week when we're talking special teams, spoiler alert, special teams, maybe we'll be talking about Willie Johnson in a different role as well. Maybe he'll see a little bit of time at punt returner or potentially at kick returner. I mean, he's got that type of speed that you like. So, maybe his name will get tossed around for those positions as well. How about the MVP of the unit, or potential MVP of the unit, I should say?
Yeah, I'm going to break this one up into two parts. I'm going to go Armani Levi's for the tight end. Because I think he's going to have a really good year. I think he showed a lot of promise last year. I expect big things from him this year. And then for the wide receiver, I'm going to go Obi Obialo. I'm going to stick it out with Obi. I think he's going to have his best year to date at Marshall. I think he's going to resemble a number one receiver. And I'm not going to predict necessarily that he's going to, go out there and catch 90 balls. That would be kind of hard to expect. But like, I think he's going to have a number one receiving caliber year. And I think that's going to really pay big dividends for the Herd this year, because they're in desperate need of one of those types of guys. Because look at every great Marshall team that they've had a legit superstar number one receiver. I mean, every single team. So they're going to have that if they want to win a conference championship. So I'm going to go with Obi Obialo for MVP receivers. All
right. I like it. Now here's where the rubber meets the road. I say that every week. Here's where the rubber meets the road, because it's hot take time for the Herd wide receivers. So I'm anxious. I didn't get any sneak preview or anything, as I'm hearing it for the first time. So give me the hot take for these Herd wide receivers.
Well, you're hearing it for the first time, and I'm thinking it for the first time. I've had absolutely no idea where I was going to go with it, but you know what? I'm going to stick with a personal stat kind of thing. I'm going to say Obi Obialo ends up with 70 plus catches. That's the mark that we're looking at, that we've been talking about, that we think needs to happen. And we've been talking about it and everything. So I think that's going to happen. I'm going to say he ends up with, let's go with 75 catches. That's a nice number for Marshall history. We'll go with 75. Go with 75 catches for 900 yards and 10 touchdowns.
Wow, double-digit TDs. Okay. So that's basically, essentially double everything.
Yeah.
42 catches last year. We're looking at a goal for 75. 505 yards last year. You're looking at a goal of 900. And 4 touchdowns. You're looking for a goal of 10. So you're expecting him to be that guy. You've got to basically double your production and give me a Tyree Brady season. I hope you're listening, Obi. Trace wants to see it. So I'm sure the rest of Herd Nation would like to see it too. But, all right. He's got faith in you. He's putting a lot of the success of this Herd receiving game on your shoulders. I hope you're ready. All right. So I like it. A lot of guys on the right. There are also a slew of receivers and tight ends that we did not mention because there are just so many on the roster that we don't have time to talk about every single player, which is unfortunate because there could easily be someone on this roster that we haven't mentioned that has the come out of nowhere breakout season for the Herd. So don't just think that these 8 or 9 guys that we talked about are it. No, there's easily another half a dozen guys on here on this roster, if not more, and all of them are capable of being that guy that comes out of nowhere and at least, wins a game for you or has a huge season. So hang with us on the other side of this break, and we're going to talk about Western Kentucky Hilltopper wide receivers and tight ends. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
They don't have to snap it. It's over. Marshall achieves perfection again. 13-0, and for the second year in a row, they are the champions of the Motor City Bowl. Total domination, both sides of the ball, by a team that will, without question, land for the first time in the top 10.
We are back. Schedules, guys, just could not line up. We were hoping to have Steven here, but he's got a little bit of an emergency, so I'm going to have to take care of your Western Kentucky Hilltopper wide receivers and tight ends. So let's get into that. Phil still ranks this unit number 6, so not too bad. Kind of right down the middle, so to speak. I do think there is a fair amount of talent here, and some people will be surprised at the numbers that may get put up by a number of these fellows, not just 1 or 2. So, look, there's no denying that they lost a huge weapon in the passing game with the departure of Myquan Dean. The guy was just super reliable in an otherwise kind of sort of shaky pass game last year. Especially when you talk about not one quarterback was settled upon for the whole year. So, these guys were catching passes from 3 different quarterbacks throughout the season and not really any of them for a long stretch, a game here, a game there, maybe 2 games, and then we'd change quarterbacks. So, but there is some positivity. The unit returned 7 of 8 of the top receivers. So let's talk about some projected starters. And nowhere better to start than wide receiver Lucky Jackson, the 6'1", 185-pound senior, lands on Phil Steele's 3rd-team All-Conference USA squad. Last year, 50 catches, 552 yards, good for 11 yards per clip and 4 touchdowns. Also, wide receiver Quinn Jernigan, the 6'3", 210-pound senior, 41 catches, 437 yards, 10.7 yards per clip, and he found the end zone once. Wide receiver Jock Sloan, 5'9", 165-pound junior, 31 catches, 495 yards. Nice yards per catch here, 16 yards per catch. That's what you like to see, although he did not find the end zone through the air last year. And tight end Kyle Fortenberry, the 6'3", 240-pound junior. Nice season last year to make a pretty good 1-2 punch along with Myquan Dean. Kyle had 36 catches, 302 yards, 8.4 yards per catch, and he found the end zone 2 times. So as a starting unit, so to speak, we don't exactly know how many wide receivers / tight ends and formations and stuff like that are going to be the go-to, but 3 wideouts and a tight end seems to be a good place to start. If the quarterback position gets settled upon early and we see even a baseline amount of production that we expect to see in the Helton offense and Ellis offense, so to speak, I think you'll see some pretty good numbers out of this group. I can't say that the ranking is too low. I can't say it's too high. As with most things, and as we talk about the tops this year, it's question marks because we don't know what we have. Now, we do know what we have as far as wide receivers and tight ends go. What we don't know is the quarterback position. We know we have a solid offensive line. We know we have capable pass catchers. It's just yet to be determined who will be QB1, and that goes a long way when you're talking about a passing game. But, I guess one of the hidden storylines is to see if Kyle Fortenberry can be the next great topper tight end. They've got a good string of tight ends that made it to the league. So, a little bit of the pressure kind of on you there, Kyle. But 36 catch season shows you're capable of stepping up. Let's talk about some guys that you might see rotating in. Wide receiver Jacor Pearson, the 5'9", 180-pound junior, 13 catches for 132 yards last year. So what's that? About 10 yards a catch. Big man Xavier Lane, 6'4", 205-pound junior, 7 catches, 55 yards last year. If I'm not mistaken, Xavier got dinged up kind of early, cut his season a little bit short. But I look for him to have a big bounce back year, and I think we're going to see what he's kind of about this year. Wide receiver Garland LaFrance. You guys may have thought you were going to hear that name in the running back episode, but nope. Told you, he's moved to the wide receiver room. 6 foot, 175-pound sophomore. He did catch 20 balls last year, 148 yards, 7.4 per catch, and he found the end zone once through the air. Now the big one, incoming freshman. We thought he was gone, then it found out he's staying. Wide receiver Manny Allen, the 6'2", 175-pound freshman. Transfer, well, not really. It's not a transfer. He was committed to USC. That would be Southern Cal, not South Carolina. We were really excited to see what he would be able to do to these Conference USA defenses, and it's good to see that he decided to, kind of remove the name from the transfer portal. I really don't know what that was all about, but I'm glad he's staying in Bowling Green. He ought to be fun to watch for the next 2, 3, 4 years. So we'll see how he gets mixed into the offense, or if he makes a impact early and is hard to keep off the field from then on. And how about a backup tight end, Josh Simon, the 6'5", 230-pound freshman. Look, a lot of height, a lot of speed, and a fair amount of production down all 8 or 9 of those that I just listed, with the exception of a couple incoming freshmen. So the hands are there. The speed is there. And I would like to think that the offensive scheme and game planning and play calling will be there. It seems like we're circling right back to that quarterback question. If that can get solidified, I think you're going to see some pretty good numbers here, Trace, from a lot of these guys. Maybe even pushing for an all-conference team, not just one, but maybe 2 or 3 of those guys. So I don't know. I think I keep saying it. I think Topper should be pleasantly surprised with what they've got here. I said it in episodes past. This is one of those units where I think you know what you have in Bowling Green. And it's just going to be – the determining factor is going to be how well the ball gets delivered to these guys. Because if you can get it into their hands, they're going to make plays for you. It's just that simple. So, where we have question marks with what the herd might have and who will step up and who will ultimately be making plays for the herd, I think you know who you got here in Bowling Green, and I think that's a good thing. You can take a sigh of relief when it comes to wide receivers and tight ends. I think this is a bona fide positive and a good stable of offensive weapons for the Toppers in 2019. So, let's talk about the biggest loss. I think it's pretty obvious. It's Myquan Dean, the NFL tight end. So, most everybody's back. Like I said, 7 of 8 top receivers are back, but the loss is a pretty big loss. Myquan Dean put up numbers from catching balls from all 3 quarterbacks, and it seemed to not miss a beat no matter who was throwing the ball, and that's pretty hard to come by. A lot of guys kind of have a favorite quarterback, or the timing might be off a little bit and here and there and the other, but that did not seem to affect Myquan Dean in his season last year. Most excited to see. I think I'm most excited to see. Well, of course, I'm always excited to see Lucky Jackson in the senior campaign. He's been putting up numbers for several years. So that's the easy choice. But I think I'm really excited to see Xavier Lane and if he has the bounce back season that I think he's going to have. It's kind of hard to defend 6'4". It's kind of hard to go body for body with a guy like that. When most DBs are 5'9", 5'10", you might have a safety every now and then that checks in at 6'1" or 6'2", but you're not going to see somebody line up and go body for body with a guy. So I'm kind of excited to see how Xavier Lane is used in the offense and how much of a mismatch he can create for against defensive backs. And if you want to put an asterisk beside it, I'm excited to see if Manny Allen is the real deal. You can't expect too much from a true freshman, but I'd be kind of surprised to see what kind of season he has. The breakout player for me, that's tough. I'm going to say it's going to be the tight end. I'm going to say it's Kyle Fortenberry because the Toppers always seem to have a top-notch tight end, and they seem to use them quite effectively in the offense. So I think Kyle Fortenberry will be the breakout player in 2019. Now, the potential MVP, I got to go with one of the seniors, and it's Lucky Jackson. 50 catches last year. He's super reliable. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be the MVP of the unit. You just can't really, not a lot of guys bring to the table what Lucky brings to the table as far as athleticism, production, leadership, the whole nine. He's the complete package, and he's probably going to be the MVP for this unit. Now, as far as a hot take goes, I'm not taking any hot takes because that's Steven's thing. Maybe when we can get the schedules ironed out, we can squeeze one out of him on the next episode. So if you're going to be angry at me about that, tough, because I'm not giving you any hot takes. I could come up with a really weak one that might be a lukewarm take, but I'd rather just save that for Steven because I'm sure he had one cocked and loaded, and I don't want to ruin it. So we'll just wait till another episode when Steven can make it on with us, and we'll nudge him for a hot take for the wide receiver unit. Lots of good information. Once again, folks, hey, man, we want to be the premier go-to source for Western Kentucky and Marshall football, basketball, news, and analysis. So as we end this episode, I got to say that next week, I alluded to it earlier in the episode, next week we'll continue the series with special teams. So look forward to that. They always play a vital role in every team's season. I don't care what level you play. Your kicking game and your return game better be on point. So next week, special teams. But right now, it's final thoughts, and then we're going to wrap it up and get the heck out of here. So Trace, lead us off with some final thoughts as we close out wide receiver week on the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Yeah, I feel like the wide receiving unit is arguably the most crucial unit heading into the season from the herd. Crucial in the sense that it's a little bit unknown. We've said it. We know what we're getting at quarterback. We know we're getting at linebacker, running back, the different positions. We think we know as fans what we're getting. But wide receiver, we really don't know what we're getting because a lot of these guys have talent, have ability. It's just, can they put it together in the way that Marshall needs it? Because, they need a number one receiver to emerge, which I predict Obi will be that. They need some guys to step up, slot guys, Artie Henry, Willie Johnson. They need guys to step up in that role. I think that they will do it or have the chance to do it. Tight ends, they're going to have good tight end play because, like I said, they always usually have good tight end play. I think they have a good duo there with Levias and Gaines. And I didn't really mention this earlier, but I feel like Isaiah Green as a sophomore and the second year starter now, that's going to really help the receiving unit out more there because, last year as a freshman, he's a little wiry at times. You don't always know what you're going to get with a freshman quarterback. So this year that he's got more experience and more, season to play under his belt, I feel like that's going to help. That's going to lift the receiving unit up a little bit there too. So I think they're going to have to step up their game themselves. But I think the emergence of Green there at quarterback, I think that's going to help them too. So that's I think it's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. So I think that they'll both end up making big step ups, and the receiving unit, even though there are questions, I think it will ultimately be good enough for Marshall to reach its goals. Yeah,
I don't want to read any more into it than you just stated. I just want to piggyback one point off of that, and this is the fact that we've said over and over again, this is year 2 in the Tim Cramsey offense, so it's not brand new stuff. These second-year quarterback, a lot of receivers have played in it. Both the running backs have played in it. All of the linemen have played in it. So you would expect to see a little more efficiency and a little more opening up of the playbook. And I think that bodes well for both yardage, points, and overall excitement from this Herd offense potentially in 2019. So nothing you can do now but look forward to it. All right. That's it. I mean, this week it was wide receivers and tight ends, the quote unquote skill positions. We're getting into the meat and potatoes of that. Look, far be it from me to say that we're not going to see a ton of passing yardage across both teams in this rivalry. We're probably going to see a ton of passing touchdowns. So, I mean, I don't know what's left to say. These two teams have a ton of talent, wide receiver and tight end wise. The Toppers, I think, at this point in the game, can feel a little bit better about where they are, whereas Marshall needs to see some guys rise up a step or two, and then maybe they can feel a little bit better about where they are. So stick with us, because next week the series of position group breakdowns will continue, and we're going to be talking special teams. You guys have to pardon me. I am fighting allergies, and I'm trying not to sound terrible.
Terrible.
So yeah, I'm trying to sound Charles Barkley terrible.
Yep.
So we're going to get out of here this week because we've got a lot of prep for special teams, and we're going to try to bring you a great episode there. So I'm going to take us out with a Go Tops. Trace, hit me.
Go Herd.
We are out of here. We will see you next week. Later.